In Florida, the state government is attempting to muzzle WFLA News by threatening to criminalize the TV station. WFLA Tampa 1 is a station being intimidated for broadcasting an ad that is pro-Amendment 4, which would reinstate abortion until 20 to 26 weeks. Now, of course, Governor DeSantis has been quite outspoken about the 6-week abortion ban that is currently in place. And the letter was sent to the WFLA station, signed by John Wilson, general counsel for the Florida Department of Health, bullying the station for airing the ad. Of course, the letter is an attempt to intimidate the press to assist in the objectives of the state government by getting them to not air an ad that was produced by the group Floridians Protecting Freedom. This story is from Truth Out by Chris Walker and was published October 9th, 2024. Well, that's an interesting that's a really interesting take on what the state government thinks they can do to the press. I thought we had freedom of press in this country. Cynthia, do you think the problem is that the Florida laws in this respect are rather vague, or do you think they're well enough to be understood completely?
Well,
that really came out poorly. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Well, the controversy highlights the vagueness of Florida's abortion laws, which could prevent necessary medical procedures even in the life or death situations, right? And we've actually seen this across the country where people who are pregnant and may not necessarily have viable pregnancies are being denied care because a lot of the abortion laws and even what you can and cannot give as treatment to people who may have either ectopic pregnancies or if they're miscarrying, actual life-saving abortions so that they can, not die. And Florida happens to be one of them. So in this particular case, even though polls actually indicate that the majority of Floridians actually support Amendment 4, the amendment faces an uphill battle for approval, requiring a supermajority of 60% in the upcoming vote. Sounds so much like the Senate filibuster.
How did they, now that's a vote in the state Congress, or are they doing this as a resolution, a voter referendum?
That's a voter referendum.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
How do they, and I don't know if you have the answer to this, but how do they justify that supermajority, the 60%? Is there some law that they use for that? I'm not sure.
To be honest,
and like I said, if you don't have the answer, I don't blame you, because I don't expect you to know all of Florida election law for crying out loud.
Yeah, I know. I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not necessarily sure exactly what type of law that they're using for this. To me, like I said, like when I just mentioned the 60 vote filibuster, like the Senate, I almost feel like this is like an arbitrary number that they're just throwing out here in order for this particular referendum to become law or not. And I think there's a larger issue here. And the larger issue is that putting bans on abortions is severely unpopular.
You went somewhere I wasn't expecting to go with the larger issue.
Yeah, I'm always going to go to the larger issue, yeah. Kelly.
No, I got a larger issue to go to too. So go ahead. But it's a different one, but go ahead.
Okay, well, so let's just make this whole episode about larger issues.
About bigger, larger issues.
Yeah. Cindy, I'm waiting for your larger issue after I'm done with my larger issue, okay?
I was just going to warn her to come up with one.
Yeah, it's like from the top of the dome, which I know you can do. But yeah, I mean, like when we're really talking about abortion bans and basically like putting these particular arbitrary laws or like guideposts like on like what you can and cannot do when it comes to these things is so unpopular. I would say that is one of the number one issues that's actually driving people to come out for elections in 2024. I would definitely say that. And as I mentioned, even in like previous segments earlier this week, when we kind of like, glossed over the topic, that we have seen real time problems with real people and how abortion bans have affected them adversely. Not just in Florida, it happens in Mississippi, We talked about that here on Nonprofits. Happened in Texas, happens in Ohio. It happens in other different red states where we can actually point out specific issues and specific events that have happened to real people when it comes to abortion ban. And I don't necessarily want to go the conspiracy route here, but if we're actually looking at, as Cindy would say, observing the different events that have happened in the past when it comes to all of these things, you almost think like the vagueness of it is intentional. Like some of the things like I pointed out, like specifically Amendment 4, if you don't mind me kind of, if you want to give me like some leeway here, a little floor, if you don't mind, I appreciate it. Thank you. So Amendment 4.
I can't stop you. You're the producer, so.
Yeah. You can stop getting tired, Kelly, you know what I'm saying? But I did want to like ask politely if people did not know that I'm one of the producers of Nonprofits, but regardless of that. But Amendment 4 in Florida actually seeks to significantly impact abortion rights within the state by establishing constitutional protections for the procedure. And so here are the actual key potential impacts of the amendment. So one is going to enshrinement of abortion rights. So if it's passed, the amendment would explicitly protect the right to obtain an abortion in Florida, allowing individuals to access the procedure up to the point of fetal viability. Typically, that is around 22 to 25 weeks of pregnancy. Secondly, it's going to counter the current law. So Florida's existing law currently bans most abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy. One of the most restrictive in the country. Amendment 4 would actually create a more permissive legal framework providing broader access to abortion services. Thirdly, it's going to legally give clarity for healthcare providers, which is something that we're seeing is so, if we're going to talk about vagueness with current abortion laws and abortion bans, that is a big one, right? So this amendment aims to clarify and protect the rights of healthcare providers to perform abortions without the fear of legal repercussions, especially in critical medical situations. This could prevent situations where doctors are hesitant to act due to vague legal definitions regarding life-threatening circumstances. Fourthly, it will impact women's health or people who have the ability to become pregnant. I don't want to just leave it up to that. With better access to abortion services, the amendment could enhance health outcomes for pregnant individuals, particularly in cases where continuing a pregnancy poses significant health risk. Fifthly, the political and social repercussions. The passage of this amendment could energize both supporters and opponents of abortion rights, potentially impacting future elections and legislative sessions. It could also lead to increased activism and funding for reproductive rights organizations. It also could, if enacted, potentially the potential and legal challenges. The amendment could face immediate legal challenges for anti-abortion groups, which, that's a thing, right? Which could lead to prolonged court battles over its interpretation and implications. So that definitely would be an issue if you're talking about issues with the law itself being vague. And then lastly, there's an influence on national trends. So as we all know that this, like I said, abortion bans is a national issue, especially when you have like about, what is it, like about 14 to 15 states now in the United States that actually have very restrictive abortion bans. So as other states observe Florida's actions regarding abortion rights, Amendment 4 outcome could influence similar movements across the country, potentially setting a precedent for other states looking to expand or, because there's always another side, restrict abortion access.
I agree with everything you just said. I don't think it's relevant to what the story is about, though. I think the story is about freedom of the press.
Really?
Yeah,
And I think it's about democracy.
Go ahead. What was that, Cindy? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think it's about democracy at its core, because it's a push to authoritarianism. It's basically I want to be able to decide what you can and can't say.
Yeah.
Even during an ad, which is crazy. But yeah, when I read the article, the first thing that popped into my mind was the nerve on that guy, on DeSantis. The nerve. It's almost admirable to have so much hypocrisy and lack of shame in just one man. I know those two characteristics are pretty much, in the conservative movement, they're pretty much spread, but he pushes them to a level that's it's just incredible. But my question is, how is this not considered election tampering? Because he's trying to influence an election directly by preventing people to listen to an ad that relates to a law that is going to be voted on.
Now, come on, Cindy. You know that's what happens here. I mean, come on.
That's not. No. She has a point though.
She does.
Because the ad is okay. It's put out by a private group, but this is the government office stepping in, right? She's got a way valid point.
Oh, I know. I was actually doing sarcasm right now.
Okay, cool.
Say that.
And that's why I love you, Cynthia, because you can do it so well.
The thing is, as you said, Cynthia, in the US, politics is much, much harder than it is in other countries. Like those ads that candidate A is going to air about candidate B and only candidate B, not themselves, that just doesn't exist outside the well, not in Europe at least. In France, for example, political ads are very, very limited, and so there isn't as much money spent on politics. I understand that the US is a large country in terms of superficie, but when I see the amounts of money that's spent and for an entire year, because election starts very, very early, that's just amazing. But having one candidate say
that would not be my word for what's happening here. You're being quite generous with the word amazing, but go ahead. I was going to say ridiculous, but go ahead.
Yes. He's because the amendment 4 is proposed by the people. It's not the government that proposes a law that it usually happens, and these popular initiatives, as they're called in Europe, they're getting traction slowly in the world, and it's a good thing. But in this case, you have some people who say, okay, we want to do this, and this is the voice of the people, literally. And you have a candidate that says, no, you will not voice your opinion here on the public TV, on a private ad that you have the right to buy and air, and that's pretty much what dictators do.
Yeah,
they decide to choose. They choose to what goes into the air and what doesn't, and that's exactly what's happening here. That's why I think it's a democracy problem, not just an abortion problem, not just an election problem, but democracy problem.
Yeah, I was gonna say this really quick, like as our colleagues across the pond would say, those are some large bullocks that the governor is displaying right now.
I minored in journalism in college, so when I read this, it really burned me up. I was just really pissed off. And even if this commercial was full of falsehoods, even if it was a direct lie, as long as it was not endangering somebody's health, it doesn't matter. They have the First Amendment backing them up. They can say whatever the hell they want to say, right? So the the state of Florida has no business at all telling what any news organization who also has freedom of the press behind them. So we're actually breaking two constitutional freedoms by sending this letter. And that's what really bothered me about that. To me was the big picture, is the state of Florida is actually the reason for it is freaking awesome, is horrible. And I agree. I don't want to belittle anything you said for the first half of this segment, Cynthia, because everything you said was right on and correct. But I thought the big picture, at least of this story, was the way that the state was squashing a news organization and thinking that it was legal to do so, that this was something they could get away with constitutionally, which of course it isn't. So that's the thing that really bothered me about this story.
If I were to interject, just to kind of piggyback on both of what you and Cindy said, just bringing out that particular point, because I gather that as well, especially when it comes to the bullying from the DeSantis administration about what this particular station can and cannot air. Remember when we talked earlier this week about a lot of people don't know the meanings of certain words like fascism, but they use it incorrectly? Mm-hmm. This is the prime example of fascism.
Oh, yes, totally. Yes, it is. Yeah. Totally agreed.
When the state is interjecting what press can and cannot air, what press can and cannot say, that is fascism, because you're controlling the narrative and you're also propagating your particular ideology on the masses. That's really a very prime example of what it is.
And not letting in any other ideology get through.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
That's the bad part of this. We're going to shut down all debate. We're going to shut down any opposing views. Right. And that's so un-American.
It is. That's exactly what our experiment was against.
There's those early warning signs of fascism. There are 12 signs. First is powerful and continuing nationalism. Second is disdain for human rights. 3, identification of enemies as unifying cause. Rampant sexism, controlled mass media, obsession with national security, religion and government intertwined, corporate power protected, labor power suppressed, disdain for intellectual and the arts, obsession with crime and punishment, and rampant cronyism and corruption. That's the early signs of fascism. So we'll let everyone look into that and see if there's any parallel with the current situation in the US right now.
Yeah. 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 That's all I gotta say about that. Yeah. I'm scared. Cindy, you got some room?
And so those early signs have been written in early 2000s by someone who studied all fascist regimens between the entire 20th century. Mm-hmm. So it's not just one thing that someone wrote on a piece of paper like this. It's a solid study.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that I would say, in a personal observation, just being like a student of history, is that fascism always seems to be interjected into a society when you are actually seeing evolving thought, when you're seeing the emergence of people who happen to buck against particular traditions that have been placed in societies previously. And with the United States being, I don't necessarily like to call it a melting pot. I think I call it a salad, and when you are having different cultures and diversities of people, and they're bringing their own traditions and values and things of that nature, that's adding to the greater society, it's going to definitely cause thoughts and practices to change, and definitely people who don't necessarily want to see that change are going to really hold on as in school days as a wino to its bottle as much as possible because they don't want to see that change. They want to keep the status quo the way that it is. And I really believe that, because he's like shown it, is that Ron DeSantis is definitely a person that has shown himself to be of this ilk.
Yeah, excuse me, Kelly, just one point, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah,
please
it's just
do.
the girls talking right now. The Cindy's are
don't mind
talking.
me.
Yeah.
The Cindy's are talking. Yes.
You can go to sleep and we'll just keep going. In an earlier episode this week, something that we talked about triggered a question in my mind, because a lot of religions have died in the history of humanity, right? But we don't have, not as far as I know, an example of a religion that dominated an entire culture for a very, very long time. That didn't happen. Religion, so far, they died slowly, naturally, and then they were replaced by a new one. But we are in a situation where there is one dominant religion in our part of the world and another one in another part of the world. There are two bigger religions, and we see that they are slowly dying, slowly.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that a way of thinking and the power structure that's behind it, that's been in power for like almost 1,500 years, how they will react when they see themselves dying.
I think they will react this way.
Exactly. That's the parallel I was trying to make. It's the exact same thing here. You have a powerful structure of government based on men's desires, basically, and that's changing slowly. We now see war as something we really, really, really want to avoid, as opposed to before it was just, I want your territory. Okay, let's end the war. And that's changing the mentality, and now there's climate change also that's coming to the picture, and so I see a huge parallel between the two. One set of belief linked to religion, and one set of beliefs linked to power structure.
Yeah, I agree.
A lot of people in our country are trying to convince us that climate change is a hoax.
Yep, sure. Yeah.
So I'm just, and again,
that's a nice way to put it, Kelly.
Yeah. So I had a really great time this week with both of you, with John while he was playing hide and seek with us. It was a great recording session. I really had a lot of fun. And we'd like to hear what you thought about it. So send us an email at tv@atheist-community.org and tell us what you liked about the show, what you hated about the show, and get rid of that Kelly guy, whatever you want to say. And if you'd like to see more of the nonprofits, just click this link right down here.